Okay, people, on my next episode here of Just for Sport, I give props to Ed Tapscott, affectionately known as Tap. He's my next guest as we talk about what the NBA season will look like when it returns and how the players, front office, and the league are handling the pandemic, in terms of the regulations and what they should and will be doing to protect the players and the staff, but also dealing with the civil unrest. Should we or should we not be playing with everything that's going on in the United States and the world? He also talks about college. That's right. He was a college coach at American University. So also get into what his thoughts are on when and if we will see a return of college basketball. Just for sport. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1. All right, Tap, thank you very much for giving me some of your time. I really appreciate it. I know you're really busy as the NBA season may be happening. I think we're moving in the right direction, but it seems like it's a little bit of a stop and start because I'd like to begin with, it seems like players are having a tough time wondering if they should be playing basketball with all that's happening right now in the world. The civil unrest, COVID-19 still being prevalent, the location, being away from family. There's so many things up in the air. What are your thoughts on where we are with the season restarting?
Well, I think everybody theoretically would like to play. But as in most things, the devil's in the details. So when the first proposal of the NBA coming back sometime here in midsummer was put out, I think everybody signed on. Then as you start to dig into, the more granular features of what you have to do in a, pandemic environment to safely put games on, it adds pause for thought. And of course, then you had obviously the tragic death, George Floyd, and now all of a sudden we're in an entirely different environment. And so I think what it's done is really complicated the equation as to how we come back and play, when we come back and play, and exactly how we come back and play. And it's understandable that people are concerned with other issues at this moment. And so while I'm optimistic, I think there are a lot of details that have to be worked out.
Mm-hmm. And again, I'm sorry, I jumped right into it. Didn't you say thank you very much for giving me some of your time and being on here with me? We have some history, and I really appreciate, who doesn't like talking to Tap and hearing, your wisdom on so many topics, from your time at Tufts and AU and getting your law degree and then working with Knicks, the Bobcats, the Wizards. How many meetings are going on right now to kind of help us understand not so much the headlines, but the minutia of what goes into trying to put these plans together to protect the players, the employees, everybody involved in this process?
I think it's countless meetings. And remember, we're not meeting like we normally meet. Mm-hmm. We're doing it virtually like this. This is a new set of protocols for everybody in terms of having to do almost all of your work remotely, where a lot of your time is spent on logistics of simply trying to get people together on a virtual call. Mm-hmm. So it's an entirely different environment, an entirely different level of workflow. And so I think it too is complicating the process just a little bit. So there are meetings going on at the NBA level, the Board of Governors level, the operations people. We probably have a larger health group than we've ever had before. The players are meeting. They have a cadre of players who are meeting on separate issues. There are other folks who are formed groups to be more focused on social justice and racial injustice. As they say, there's a lot going on right now. And mm-hmm. So all these things have to be worked out and put into proper perspective and sort of be weighed as we move forward. So this is a time where there's, I think, intense discussions going on, and the circumstances in today's world demand intense discussion.
Mm-hmm. What is there a side of the fence that you fall on when you hear the players worrying that we shouldn't be playing basketball because of the civil unrest right now, and our focus should be on healing the country and not so much playing a sport? Because then you have the other hand that's like, hey, but if we have the money in our pocket from playing, then we're able to do more for, the general public. And I mean, even Kendrick Perkins on ESPN went so far to say, hey, at least with Kyrie Irving, hey, if you want to go the Maya Moore route, you can quit right now and focus all of your attention on Black Lives Matter. And, it'd be interesting to see if Kyrie's what's going through his mind after maybe hearing that. But what's your thought if you're working in the front office or a coach, because you've served in both roles, and how you talk to the players about the decision that they should make for African Americans and what they believe inside they should or should not be doing?
Well, I think this is a moment of conscience, Jumoke. I think people should move based upon where their conscience takes them. I would hold no remorse towards anyone who decided that they wanted to change the focus of their life at this moment. These are extreme times many of us have never faced. And so I understand why people could say, I just can't focus on playing right now. I have something I think is more important, more germane to what is important to me and my family and my community. So I understand that. So, I think you can make arguments on both sides, very cogent arguments. I think that there are values to be expressed that speak to the idea of being committed to the concept of social justice. But I would remind people that protesting is just the first step. Mm-hmm. Protesting is raising consciousness, it's educating, but we need legislation. We need rethinking. Mm-hmm. We need new regulations. We need culture change. So there are other processes above marching and protesting that we need to engage in. So I'm hoping that at some point we'll get to that. And perhaps that is the next step of activity for some of the people who don't feel that they are emotionally able to commit to performing on a basketball court and would like to put their energy in that area. Mm-hmm. By the same token, within a democracy, people are free to make choices. And if there are people who want to play and feel that playing in an NBA season gives them a larger platform because of media, they too can exercise their concern in that way. So we don't have to be monolithic here in terms of saying there's one path for every person. There are multiple paths, and people have to choose their paths based upon their values and their conscience. So that's where I come down on it. And I would understand if a guy said, I can't play. Okay, I understand. Mm-hmm. And then I also understand the guys say, to the same token, I understand the guys who would say, let's play and let's see if we can't use our platform and galvanizing people's attention and being able to speak to these issues while we play. I don't think there's a right or a wrong.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think as a league, the NBA has been at the forefront of being able to express what they believe in, the platforms, the messages, whether it's Black Lives Matter or, cancer research, or the players also having even more of their own foundations that the teams kind of help them promote as well. Hence, John Wall, the 202 campaign that he's working on with Ward 8, things like that. Why do you think the NBA has been at that forefront?
Well, I think take a look at the demographics of the NBA, and I think you get a lot of your answer. Mm-hmm. Despite the fact that we have obviously very talented young men who make wonderful livings at the NBA, they stay connected to their community. They have extended families. Their extended families probably live in a variety of circumstances, and those circumstances touch your life. So while you may be living quite well as an NBA player, there's somebody in your circle that mm-hmm. Could be struggling with the variety of social ills that we have in our country today. So it's that touch point that keeps you connected to some of the issues that people are struggling with. And there's a natural desire to want to help, even if it's just within the small circle of your family. You are contributing to helping people. And then as you expand outside to people of your community or your city or your region, and you're able to galvanize more people to be supportive, you are also making an impact. And I think it all starts with touch points. who touches us in our daily lives. Who are we? Where did we come from? Who is the circle, or who are the people in the circle that touch us? And that keeps us grounded and connected. And I think given the demographics of the NBA, it's no surprise that issues like social justice, over-aggressive policing, and all those other issues touch the people who populate our league.
Mm-hmm. Now, I guess I also wonder if, the NBA just came out with their report on how they're going to handle the COVID-19 regulations, who can go where, who has to wear a mask, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think that maybe until this report came out, I think behind the scenes they were focused on it, but I wonder if you've got the sense that in the public eye, it was maybe almost too focused on the social justice aspect and not so much talking about the fact that there is no cure for this COVID-19 and multiple players could end up catching it. And we need to be focused on that.
Multiple players already have. Thankfully, all the outcomes have been positive. But yes, we understand it's an infectious disease. And look, man, there are a lot of reasons to play, and there are a lot of reasons not to play. A player came to me and said, I just don't feel safe. I don't feel safe outside of my environment, the environment that I can control. I would understand that. Because in this circumstance, in a pandemic, we are all partnered. Your health is my health. Your respect for protocols, regulations, rules, and proper mitigation of infectious disease impacts me. And my willingness to do the same impacts you and on down the line. So if a player said, I just don't feel safe, I would understand that. That would be a reason for me to understand why he wouldn't play. In the same way, if a player said, I just can't play right now, I want to focus on the social justice issues of this moment at this time that are turbulently sort of roiling within our country, I could understand that. And then in some regards, I would also understand the attitude or the issue related to family separation for a 3-month season, completely separated from family and locked into a quarantine. That is not an environment many of us are used to engaging. So there are a lot of different themes that can sort of deny the possibility of participation. And I think we all have to be aware, sympathetic, empathetic, and help people work through where they are and how they're feeling.
Putting your coach hat on, do you think that it will be harder or easier to coach players if and when the season does officially restart and you're in that closed environment where it's just you and your team?
Well, nobody knows. I mean, when have we ever faced circumstances like this before?
True.
When have we ever been to a single campus, played in front of no fans, asked players to focus and concentrate in this alien environment that we've put them in with no family, social justice issues roiling about the country, and constant concern for one's physical health? Never have we ever faced circumstances like that. So I can't say it would be easier. Perhaps to some it would be a relief. It would be diverting from some of the things that plague their day every day. So who knows? What we have to do is try and do so in as reasonable and as safe a fashion as we possibly can, and have a series of protocols standing and ready to go in case other circumstances pop up. I don't know how anyone would be able to predict how this is going to go, because I don't think anybody has anything remotely like this in their experience.
Yeah. And I think not just your experience, but my experience, I feel like when I'm hearing what they're doing, it makes me think of like training camp, where I guess, your family would come sometimes. And I know 3 months is a lot different from 2 or 3 weeks.
Training camps, if we went away for training camps, families don't usually come.
Yeah.
But this isn't training camp. This is 3 months of a season. Training camp is the team bonding, practices, scrimmage games, there's a certain rhythm to training camp we all know.
Mm-hmm.
We're asking guys to play a portion of the season here.
Right.
1/5 of the season, whatever the percentage is, 20% of the season or so. But we're asking them to play this portion of the season in unique circumstances, none that any of us have ever confronted before. So it's hard to predict how players are going to feel, how coaches are going to feel, what the level of performance is going to be. It's an unknown. So you go forth with caution and with plans and anticipation to respond appropriately if problems occur.
Will you plan to be down there with your team? How are your preparations going?
For me, I'm sort of focused on the process of next year's team. I'm in the player personnel area. So a lot of what I do now does not touch the players, unlike my Wizards tenure where I was with the players, the current players all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I don't think I would be prioritized. Remember, you can only take 37.
Yeah.
17 of them would be players.
Mm-hmm.
And then the remaining 20 would be coaches, staff, support staff, etc. And I don't count myself as indispensable to that activity. They can go on without me easily. We tend to focus also on just the players and the things that they will be confronting. Coaches and staff members are confronting the same things.
Mm-hmm.
The concern about their health, the concerns about what's going on in the world for them, the concerns about leaving family. So it's not just about the players. Everyone is going to make a sacrifice for the health and the well-being of the game of basketball from an NBA perspective. And it's going to call for you to be willing to sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
Having said so, we had to make a similar sacrifice a couple of months ago where we shut the country down.
Mm-hmm.
The entire United States of America, with the exception of certain essential services, sequestered itself. So this is a time of sacrifice. And I think we all better get used to it.
A theme over the last month, as I've had people on the podcast, is talking about how sports can heal. And yes, this is different, but I still feel like, not having fans, I think, takes away from the healing. But where do you see this being a healing factor for the country? Or is it just a distraction because it's a sport?
Well, distractions can be healing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very important part of our life beyond our physical well-being. It's our mental well-being. Having been sequestered for months on end, people together in their homes, unable to engage in their normal activities that keep them engaged and safe and healthy, oftentimes to provide them with a distraction, something that they enjoy, is actually promotes their good health and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Emotional well-being is a very important part of our overall health. So providing focused activities, you can call them distractions if you like, but providing something that people enjoy, can share, can sort of refocus their attention to, oftentimes is very helpful in terms of adding to their mental health. So if possible, if we can do so safely with the concerns of our players, staff, coaches, etc., provide communities, cities, the nation with an activity that they can all sort of galvanize around and take joy in, I'd say that we could provide a very, very helpful service to the country, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. If I can switch subjects, a little lighter note. I know it's been some weeks since it debuted, but, your career spans the entire career of Michael Jordan. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask you if you could share a story, a personal experience that you have with Michael Jordan, but also maybe just your thoughts on The Last Dance. I mean, we're all still talking about it. Some people are rewatching it, putting, clips online, talking about how great of a documentary it was.
Yeah, I have actually a pretty positive story about Michael Jordan. And it relates to seeing him in an all-star game out in San Francisco, out in the Bay Area. This was a time when I was transitioning from the Knicks into another position. And I was at the All-Star game, and I had my daughter with me. And at the time, she may have been 7 or 8 years old. And we were walking through the lobby. And who did I bump into but MJ? So I said hello. MJ responded, "Hey, Tap, how you doing?" And my daughter, of course, starts tugging on my pants leg. "You know Michael Jordan, you know Michael Jordan." And I go, "Yes." And I said, "Michael, would you mind meeting my daughter? She would certainly love to meet you." And so Michael stopped, bent over, and said, "And your name is?" And she said, "Logan Tapscott," of course, in her precocious way. And they shook hands. And he said, "Are you a basketball fan?" And she said, "Yes." And then he asked, of course, "And who are you a big fan of?" And she said, "You." And so he said, "Well, good choice." And he shook her hand, kind of patted her on the cheek, and we parted company. We go upstairs. My daughter doesn't say a word on the trip upstairs to the room. As we walk into the hotel room, my wife is there, and my daughter puts her hand on her head and goes, "Mom, I met Michael Jordan," and she faints.
What? Oh my God.
It was a play acting feint, but it was very well executed by my daughter. So that was a very, very positive encounter that I had with Michael Jordan. Most of my encounters with Michael Jordan was when I was with the Knicks, and I was left sorely disappointed most times, as the Bulls generally beat the Knicks whenever we wanted to win. So the most positive one I could come up with is this story of my daughter meeting Michael Jordan and then coming in and swooning in front of my wife. So that's my MJ story. And he was delightful. He was very, very nice to my daughter. And I've always appreciated that.
Did you get to see the documentary in its entirety?
Oh, yeah, I did. I watched almost all of it,
Yeah.
And you have to remember, there were a few moments in there that were just a painful reliving.
Oh, yeah.
Things that I could recall from my days with the Knicks. How many times we went up against MJ and couldn't get past him. So some of it was, I was sitting there gritting my teeth.
Yeah.
I had lived through it once before, and here it was being revisited again.
And you probably didn't want to have to live through it again, but
I assure you the outcome didn't change. That's
It didn't. When you watch the NBA today, would you say that was the best era? I mean, because I feel like it's always an argument, but it's like you had Patrick Ewing and Hakeem Olajuwon and Bird, Magic, Jordan, Zeke. You know, now when you watch it today, what are the differences that you see in the game and some of the similarities?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, the greatest thing about the NBA is the level of competition. Clearly, the greatest athletes in the world, who are the biggest people in the world, who are the most graceful people in the world, who play the game 3 feet off the floor. So that part of it has not changed. The style of play has changed quite a bit. We've moved to more of a positionless type of game, whereas in that time, you played specific positions with specific attributes that you thought were appropriate for the position. Mm-hmm. And so, and while that was certainly a golden era of the NBA, quite honestly, we are now in another golden era of the NBA. And the NBA and the game of basketball is quite malleable. It adjusts, it grows, it evolves. And so while I enjoyed the competition then, I enjoy the competition now. Mm-hmm. And even though the game is quite different, the game is larger, it's more international. So I think we're in a wonderful time in the game today. And that was a wonderful time back in the 80s and 90s during those battles with the Bulls when I was a New York Knick.
Yeah. I feel like I can't believe I'm going to bring up Kendrick Perkins twice, but he even said on a tweet that, you know, he thought LeBron James was like the best athlete of all time, best NBA all-around player of all time, and Bill Russell came right back at him and said, "Hey, man, I was a high jump champion, and I gave that up for basketball. So you want to talk about all-around athletes?" He said, "Okay, touche."
Well,
we do forget that.
Where Russell said that, Will Chamberlain also was a high jump champion at the University of Kansas. At that time, I think it was the Big Eight. He also ran the quarter mile.
Yeah.
So there were great athletes in the league throughout its history. So oftentimes, I know it's good cannon fodder for the media to discuss eras. They're all different, but they're all special. And so, and they are all uniquely populated by special people who become our stars and become the driving force of our league. So I'm old enough in my 30 seasons in the NBA to have seen a lot. And so I just sort of say, hey, I've enjoyed each part of it and each part of the growth and development of the game.
Mm-hmm. And to go down a level, you also coach college at American University. You practically caused Georgetown to never play AU again.
Well, I don't know if I caused that.
Well, your team beat them as a coach. You know, it's like, okay, we got to stop playing American.
We played several years after that, and they beat the skates off of us, by the way. So, you know, I mean, yeah, it was a great upset win. It was probably something that happened that's one of the pinnacles of my career at the time. Continues to be, I guess, to this day. But, yeah, I mean, we played for another 3-4 years before schedule pressure and all the rest. The Big East became a big part of what Georgetown was doing. Local games seemed to diminish in terms of importance. So, you know, we changed focus. So I remember we didn't play Georgetown one year when they weren't able to put us on the schedule. And who did we schedule? Kansas, the year they won the national championship with Danny Manning. So somebody was doing a very good job of scheduling, and I think that was me.
How much do you think that, should it come to this, that it's important, you know, for them to find a way to keep the college game going? I mean, because I think that you can't have students on campus if we're worried about, you know, COVID-19, and then to think, well, then that means that includes student athletes. And then do we even have college basketball at that point, or college football for that matter too?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge issue. I think part of how successful the NBA does with starting its league will give some form of indication to the college sports and other professional sports as to the steps you take and what missteps to avoid. You know, we tend to think of college sports as being strictly amateur, but remember, there are big dollars involved with college sports.
Yeah.
And I saw a quote from a athletic director, I think, who was at Iowa State, that said, no college football, no college athletics, because college football tends to underwrite all the other sports in terms of their participation. So if you have no college football, you might very well have no other sports, no wrestling, no volleyball, no men and women's track and field. None of that will go if football doesn't go. Basketball might be able to go separately if, with time, the situation regarding the pandemic mitigates a bit, because basketball generates its own revenue. But it would be very very different to play just like in the NBA with no crowds in the stands. There would have to be an interesting set of protocols to keep student athletes safe. People don't understand, when you're talking about student athletes coming to college, an 18, 19, 20-year-old student athlete is somebody's child. You have a very, very high duty to keep them safe as you travel around the country playing basketball games. So how do we enforce the protocols of safety for college basketball or college football? So that is an enormous task, and it's going to have to be considered by people obviously smarter than us.
Well, maybe smarter than me, but not you, Tap. Not you, Tap. Thank you so much for giving me some of your time here on Just for Sport. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good to see you, Jumoke. Stay safe.
Good to see you, too.
Stay
Will
safe.
do. All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, I want to thank Tap for coming on the show. I really appreciate it here at the Props Network. You can check out more by subscribing to our YouTube page right here. But also, if you were listening to a podcast, I thank you for that as well. You can catch all of our podcasts on iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, and more. Please share and leave a review. Thank you for listening and watching. Ciao for now.